Today I'm at one of our flip projects where I want to show you guys how we go about costing down on our materials, sequencing our work, and making our projects to be profitable and affordable to do. I want to teach you guys how we break down the 5 stages of renovations and constructions to make everything work smoothly and optimize our operation. Let's get into it. Hey guys, so in this video I want to show you this 2-bedroom, 1,000 square foot apartment. It's a basement unit, and I want to show you guys how to sequence your work if you're a DIY house flipper or if you are somebody who is a real estate investor self-managing the project. You're going to want to know these things. So I'm going to break it down on a high level to make things relatively simple so you can do this to optimize your workflow. 5 stages are going to be structural work, then we have framing and lumber, we're going to talk about mechanical, then we're going to talk about drywall, painting, plaster, all of that in one category, and then we're going to talk about finishes. The finishing work is going to be something we spend a little bit of time on because that is where a lot of the money goes. But let's start off with structural. Structural work constitutes things that you may have to do that have to do with the structure of the home. If you have to open up a doorway like this, you're going to be consolidating the work with the same crew. You're going to be hiring structural guys to do structural work, and anything else that is considered to be structural work, opening up windows, moving walls. Now, how much does this cost? I'm going to give you ballpark numbers so at least you don't get ripped off. If you're costing down on some of the structural work, they're going to price things down in stages. So cutting a hole in, let's say, a cinder block wall is going to run you something like $600 just to cut the hole. But then there's also the actual reinforcement. Like, you're going to have to put the lintel up there, you're going to have to make it stronger, and somebody has to know what they're doing. You don't want to be cheaping out or costing down too much on work that is really important. But just so you know, it's going to run you anywhere between $1,200 to $1,800 to get that hole done. That doesn't include the cost of the door, and that doesn't include digging out the outside so you have access to your basement apartment. Not even permits, nothing like that, just cutting the hole. And in order to save money, you want to consolidate all that work together. Now, the same structural guys who are going to be cutting the door, you're also going to get them to open up your windows. Now, if you're opening up a window, and this is why we do this before framing, is that you want to have your framing guys later come and frame around wherever the openings are. After they cut the holes, they're going to board it up with plywood, and they're going to provision it so that it's ready for when the window guys come to measure and install the windows at a later point. So if somebody's going to have to move any walls, we're not talking about partition walls that are not holding anything up above it. This is where in some of my previous videos I look at the beams going across, and you want to see where they're joining up. If you have any kind of joists going across and they are perpendicular to the wall, they're going to be resting on it like this. You want to see if there's a joint point or if there's a wall above it. This is also going to be where if you're making certain changes to the apartment or to the house, you want to get the same structural guys to address that. Now, if they're doing the framing for this, you might ask, well, why don't I get them to do the framing for everything? This is why we're going to talk about stage 2, framing and lumber. The reason why we separate this is because you do not want to be getting the same guys who are doing structural work that are going to be expensive to be doing the framing work. That is how we cost down. As a real estate investor, you want to make sure to sequence the work correctly so that you can reap the benefits of the savings. So the reality is a lot of real estate investors are self-managing their projects. They really take control because they want to be involved in buying the finishing products, and they want to make sure that they are paying what they're supposed to be paying for materials. This is, we said, 1,000 square foot apartment. For a place like this, you're probably spending in and around $700 in lumber just for the walls. That doesn't include ceilings, bulkheads, or anything like that, so you can round that number up to about $1,000 in lumber costs. You're gonna get some framing guys in here, bam, 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 they're gonna frame everything up. It's pretty easy, pretty straightforward, as long as they have experience doing it. So your framing guys are gonna come in, they're gonna frame all the walls, they're gonna frame all the bulkheads, and anything where you have any mechanical, like HVAC going through, and anywhere where you are aware that you're gonna need to run new HVAC so that the place is heated properly, you're also gonna wanna do that. It's very important to get this stage done as quickly as possible, because after stage 2, really important part coming in, which is stage 3, mechanicals. This is the guts of the project. So let's talk about that. When we're talking about mechanical, you're gonna need to hire a plumber, you're gonna need to hire an electrician, and you may need to hire an HVAC technician as well if you're doing anything to the heating system. The thing to understand here is that these are highly specialized trades, and on a large renovation project, it can be extremely expensive. So how do you cost down? If you hire an electrician to go and rewire the whole house, they're gonna be extremely expensive. But the thing is that most of the work that they're doing at some point ends up being apprentice work. So it becomes very expensive if you hire an electrician to fish wires. The contractor will get one of their guys, or they themselves, if they're the ones doing it, to fish all the electrical where it needs to go, and then the electrician is gonna come in and do the connections. Not all electricians are gonna be okay doing this. They have to know the person that you're working with, and there's an understanding in that relationship. It's the same thing with plumbing work. If you look at this, this is PEX B line. These are fished through the walls walls the same way a lot of electricals are. It's no longer that old copper soldering and all that stuff that you had to do where it was a real skill. And now this also falls into certain apprentice line of work where it can just be fished through and you don't need to have a plumber necessarily do all this. You get them to run all the lines and the plumber comes in and does all the connections. Overall, I think we spent about $600 in plumbing material, and that includes the ABS for this place as well. Now, we're not digging up any drains, moving kitchens or plumbing around. We're just keeping everything where it is. But now let's talk about drywall. So drywall, plaster, and paint. We spent about $1,500 on drywall material for about 100 sheets of drywall. Plastering and mud materials cost $600 for the whole place, and then we ended off with paint. Not going to be too expensive here if you do it the way we do it. We spray painted this entire place, and this is why sequencing is important. If you don't have to protect the floors, you don't have to protect doors, you don't have to protect windows. And we spray painted everything in primers, spray painted everything, the ceilings, so we can get into crevices. You save tremendously on labor, $500 in material for the whole place. So all in all, that stage of materials ran us something in between $2,500 to $3,000. So now we're gonna talk about stage 5, which is finishing items. Anything that has to do with preference or taste. Anything that you're gonna go after all the construction is done and you're just choosing things that you like. It usually is things like flooring, kitchens, cabinets, countertops, appliances, light fixtures, anything like that. These are all the finishings that you're gonna spend quite a bit of money on if you put too much of your taste into it. So you wanna go with that mid-tier, affordable, sensible, and strong, and that's what we wanna talk about. So for basement floors, we like to go with a material like this. This is a 5.5 millimeter. It's a vinyl plank, and it has an under padding. Now this is very useful so you don't hear any of that clapping if there is a bit of a gap, but I find that 5.5, especially for certain basement floors, this is rigid enough to go over certain gaps, but it's also thin enough to conform to a grade of the floor, because your floors are not always gonna be perfectly level. If it's too thick and too rigid, you're gonna have some clapping happening. So I find that this is actually the sweet spot and also gives you the best bang for buck. Now, if we have a 1,000 square foot apartment, you're gonna be spending anywhere from about $2 to $3 for this type of material. But if you buy it wholesale, we get this for about $1.50 to $1.60 per square foot. It's not only about the material that you get. The contractor is gonna end up saying, hey, this floor is the worst product you could have bought, and you know, we have a lot of trouble installing it. The thing when you buy cheap floor is that it doesn't click into each other very nicely. So this is what makes this easy. You slide it in, you back it up. You're gonna take a finishing piece like this so that you can put it in here, and you're just gonna tap this in. And like, you see how right now there's tension? It's because it's not clicked in over here correctly. You're gonna hammer that, and you see how as soon as I hammer it, it clicks in and it goes down. You're gonna do the same thing over here, make sure that it's in everywhere that it should be. So you see this floor over here, it's not clicked in. And with a lot of floors, you actually have a tongue that you need to insert that way. But this one, the nice thing about it is that you can it just clicks in. Now, the thing that's bad about it is that if you mess this up, you don't install it, this place, if you remove it later, it doesn't connect properly again. So you end up scrapping the piece. But how often are you gonna mess that up? Point is, this is really easy to install, and the next piece goes over there and it reinforces this joint. But that is super easy. And if you buy materials that are both affordable, sensible, and easy to install, everybody saves. Now, I know that we talked about spraying the whole place, but painting is still technically part of the finish. It's gonna be good enough, especially for rental properties. But let's say you wanna get a little bit of a higher tier finish. I like to go for a satin finish because it's gonna have a very slight sheen to it. You're gonna be able to take a cloth and wipe it when your tenancies turn over. So that's where you wanna make things have longevity. Bathrooms, really quickly, we're gonna talk about this. Price does not always equal quality. You can find affordable, sensible products. If you're buying all these tiles for an ordinary renovation, it's probably gonna cost you in and around 800, 900 bucks to do something like this. All of these tiles, including the floor, with adhesives, cost us about $600. This is why if you're a DIY person, or if you're self-managing the project, or you have somebody that you employ regularly, this becomes very affordable to do. So this is a solid marble threshold. This costs $70. Couldn't find it in black, but this is okay. The reason why we put a solid piece here instead of just the regular tiles is because water always sits here. Over time, water can get through the grout lines. The grout is permeable. It can warp something underneath, and you don't want that happening to your rental property. So always put a solid piece going across the base. You can also do vinyl in the bathroom floor, especially if it's on the second floor or something like that. I find that it's better because it keeps the house light, easier, cheaper to install. Really quickly, let's talk about light fixtures. So this is something that I actually made a video about how I got these on sale. I bought this for $5, so that's cheating. But generally, this will run you about $70 for something like this. But you're provisioning here to have a mirror, and this is a floating vanity. It was just on clearance at IKEA. So all of this, $600. You always want to make sure to have a GFI here, and we have a space over there so that we can provision for just a standard standard cabinet to put in the corner for storage. And that's everything you're gonna need here. Now, while we're on the topic of lights, the material cost on pot light is gonna run you anywhere from as cheap as $12 a pot light all the way to $40 a pot light. And the sweet spot seems to be around $20 per pot light. But then when you factor in installation and all these other things, it can be very expensive. A singular dome light for an entire room is gonna cost you about 30 bucks. But over here, these were already in here, so we left them and we maintained them. We didn't have to do anything here. Remember, $20 per light and you need 4 per room. That's gonna be 80 bucks versus the 20 or 30 bucks for one single dome light. But we find that we spent on this place $600 total for all the materials for lighting. If you look at this wall, I know anybody looking at this might say, why are there so many outlets? There are a lot of outlets here because of how we've laid out the kitchen. And so there's an outlet out there that's gonna be for the over-the-hood range microwave. There's an outlet up here because we're gonna have a shelf here and we just want to have a provision for decorations. There's an outlet here because there's gonna be a counter and that's gonna be switched to GFI. And then there's gonna be an outlet here because there's gonna be an island here. And if you're sitting on an island, maybe you wanna be able to charge your phones. These are just little things that if you have foresight onto what you're doing, you can make sure to install them. The kitchen design is gonna be as follows. A 15-inch base cabinet over here in the corner with a 15 base upper. We're gonna have a 30-inch upper for above the stove. And then we're gonna have a 24-inch wide right about here with a 24-inch base for the dishwasher. And then we're gonna have a 30 for the sink, and then we're gonna have a 30 and a 30 for the island. How much would this cost? If you're buying it from IKEA, you're easily spending upwards of $2,700. If you're doing this with a custom cabinet maker, we're getting this for about $1,800, taxes in. That's just for the kitchen cabinet. And then you have your countertop that you need to do. Now, quartz is generally gonna be very cost effective to do a straight plus an island. And maybe you wanna do quartz backsplash as well. We sometimes find leftover materials, so for us, we're going to do the IKEA countertop here because we happen to have one kicking around, so we're just gonna install that, and we're also gonna install a straight. So we're gonna order one of the straights. But if you had to do this would be about $700 in countertop here, plus you have to do the backsplash. All in all, kitchen materials here is gonna cost us anywhere between $2,500 to $2,800. So let's talk about doors, trims, baseboards. You wanna make sure that depending on the place that you're working with, if this gap here is really big, you're gonna need to go for the taller baseboard. But if it's not that big, you can order the contractor packs. They're gonna be a little bit smaller. They're gonna be very cheap. It's like 50 bucks for like a whole whack of them. Now, if you buy the square ones, you can go with the same baseboard here and you can use the same trim along the door as well. But if you buy the beveled ones, you're going to probably need to get a different size for the baseboard than you are gonna use for the door trim. The doors are gonna run you 120 bucks pre-hung. Doors are surprisingly expensive and you're gonna have to also paint them. Trims, doors, anything like that is gonna get a white coat of paint at the end. So let's do a quick recap of what we learned today. So we went over the 5 stages of renovation and construction, and the importance of understanding the sequence is so that we can put together a work that is gonna make things more affordable and cost effective and thereby more profitable for us as real estate investors. And we have found that we save about 30% on average across all of our projects by internalizing and self-managing and having a process to operate this whole thing. How many of you wanna quit your jobs? How many of you wanna get into real estate full-time but are unsure how? If you are prepared to spend this kind of money and you can optimize to conserve this kind of money, you either have an easier in into real estate or you have a way to stop working a job you don't like. You don't have to get your hands dirty, you have to understand how to put it together. That is what a real estate investor does. Hope this video was valuable to you and you learned something about how to do renovations. If you want to connect with me, ask me any questions, find me on Instagram, shoot me a message. I'd love to help.